So good morning. My name is Kristan Straub. Spent quite a few years in mining, in exploration. Started out very much in grassroots work, the work that sees companies going out into the bush, into various traditional areas, meeting with communities, gaining an understanding with communities before we started our work, and then proceeding with work all the way through to developing projects, running operations, negotiating impact benefits agreements, and living up to those impact benefits agreements. Why that's important for me, I'm a member of the Henvey Inlet First Nation. My family on my mother's side, it was always extremely important for them and for myself to have an understanding of the land, to practice our traditional practices, and to understand how development, economic opportunities went hand in hand with the work that happens in the regions. Whether that's mining, whether that's forestry, there was always that understanding that our family carried. Something that I've carried through all the way. Something that I firmly believe in, which is, for me, why I took this opportunity to work with this company, Wyloo, and start off there as the Chief Executive Officer for the work here in Canada, and to lead this project with a team of wonderful people who are in this room today, and to lead the project in a different manner. And hopefully today, I can give you a bit of an understanding of what that approach is. I'm not sure, Mike, whether there's questions and answers afterwards, but happy to field some questions if there isn't an opportunity and the questions don't get asked in the panel. I'm here and happy and open to entertain discussions or have a question afterwards, whether that's a word of support, a question in the direction, or a word that is, or a comment or a question that says, look, we really don't agree with this. I think all input is valuable. So without further ado, I'll go through the presentation. I will go fairly quickly for the first couple of slides and then really focus on some of the things that we have taken from an approach perspective. So I won't go through all the confidentiality disclaimer, so next slide, please. A little bit about who we are and where Wyloo is based, if you go back to the previous slide. Suffice to say, Wyloo is a company that's based out of Australia and based out of here in Canada. There is a headquarter in Australia for a company that holds nickel operations that are currently on care and maintenance in Western Australia, 2 operations in the Kambalda region, and a joint venture with another group called IGO on a potential battery metals processing facility in the Perth region. And you can see that up in the upper right-hand side. In terms of our position within the Ring of Fire, we have 2 deposits, the Eagle's Nest deposit and some chromite deposits that are host into this region. The principal one being the Blackbird deposit, which is the closest to the Eagle's Nest deposit. And I won't go through all of those. I'm certain that many of you have a good solid understanding of the last 20 years within the Ring of Fire region and the approaches and the mineral deposits that are there. Next slide, please. In terms of our approach, we have taken an approach that is centered on people, planet, and project. And why in that order? Because it's important to have engagement from the people, the local stakeholders, the local landholders, and the Indigenous peoples in the region first and foremost. If we don't have that as a fundamental base, proceeding on to the next steps is not something that's going to be meaningful or is going to be able to progress. So that has been the very clear direction that we've taken from a first principles approach base to ensure that we have engagement with our communities, with the Indigenous groups that we're working with, and carry that forward. And we work very closely with groups like Martin Falls and Webbequay, and continue to outreach to other communities to understand their position and offer information on the project and our work as we carry forward. On the planet, we've designed a project that we think has one of the smallest footprints in the region in North America. Looked at a couple of other previous projects, and you're looking at designing a project that has less than a square kilometer of an impact in terms of the positioning of it on the land. No tailings at surface, aiming to be net zero, and then putting all of the mining, the potentially acid generating the tailings wastes back underground. So that covers those 3 particular aspects of it, and it's through that approach that we look to form genuine partnerships, and I'll talk a little bit about the partnerships in terms of business development quite shortly. Next slide, please. In terms of location, I think everyone here knows where it's located. You'll see the map with the railroads across Ontario and the 3 sections of the community-led assessments for the 3 roads, the Martin Falls Community Access Roads that comes off the Painter Lake Road, the Webequie Supply Road, and then the linking road that both communities are the joint proponents for the environmental assessment on. Next slide, please. If we look at the people aspect, this is a slide, a photo from a teepee that we have put up at site in an effort to create a safe space for our Indigenous employees at work to be able to practice their traditional practices, but also to create a space for learning, in an ability to be able to create a space for both local Indigenous peoples to share parts of their culture with some of the outside world that comes in, and to create that understanding and create a space for people to learn and exchange. Our team's done a fantastic job at the engagement with communities, on the design behind it, the activities that are held with it, and we get together as both communities and community members and our company on a regular basis. Next slide. In terms of collaboration, we have 2 current memorandums of understandings, I think I mentioned, with both Martin Falls and Webequie. They're the 2 First Nations that we work the closest with through this area and meet on a regular basis. We've had an opportunity to have our ownership and our leadership teams come over and visit both communities, as well as community leaders from each of the areas. Next slide. In terms of First Nations empowerment, we look to maximize the employment that's there. And by maximizing employment, it doesn't just start with we're going to post jobs and offer jobs. And much of the work that I've done in my career has been really about creating training pathways for individuals to come into the workplace, understand how do I get into the workplace, what are the skills that I need to, and as a business, either providing the skills or working with skills providers to ensure that people have the correct level of skills to come in and be functional within the workplace. And that can be somebody coming in at an entry-level job, and some of the proudest achievements that I've seen employees have are people that come in through entry-level jobs and then take on very high-functioning roles within our organization on a few years afterwards. If you put dedicated training programs together, you identify pathways and you identify the competencies that need to be achieved, and you support individuals, people can do it, and they do it excellently, and we see this across the board. One of the things that I've said in many other discussions is Canadian companies, as we export our mining knowledge and our activities elsewhere across the globe, we're able to achieve 80, 90% plus foreign nationals working in an operation. There's no reason why we can't do it here in North America, here in Canada, here in Northwestern Ontario. There's no reason we can't continue to strive for that objective of maximizing the number of people that are employed at our operation, ensuring that people have the training pathways, the training necessary to be successful and functional in this particular aspect. I've spoken about the opportunities, but the second one is the Indigenous-led businesses, something I believe we're one of the only companies who has an individual who reports to the senior executives who has a responsibility to work with First Nations on identifying those businesses, creating those businesses, and working those businesses to ensure that they are supportive. So changing the dynamic from having a negotiated impact benefits agreement where it's just a payment and a handout to ensuring that First Nations are engaged on the cost side of the business. They're leading and running with procurement activities, identifying which particular businesses that they would like to invest in, and we're providing that support to be able to do it. It's something that we do as businesses outside of it. We do it with other non-Indigenous businesses. Again, we're working to create those relationships, and we've committed to establishing at a minimum of $100 million in contracting that will start with our business for First Nations businesses to start. Next slide, please. We spoke about the business partnerships. We're looking at a couple of them right now in terms of access to the site around the Muckatai Aerodrome, an aerodrome that was created in the earlier years of exploration in and around the Ring of Fire area, and looking to reactivate that opportunity that exists through there. We're looking at developing access through winter roads that were previously looked at from the south through Martin Falls all the way back up to site at this point in time. And those are concrete business opportunities that we're working with Martin Falls First Nation as it is today. Next. As I'd mentioned a little bit earlier, in having an individual who's responsible and accountable for the Indigenous business development, we've actually held a workshop. And the workshop that we had held was we brought our First Nation, some of our First Nation partners in to see what other partnerships look like across Canada, to have a discussion with leaders like Ted Moses out of the James Bay Cree, to understand how the James Bay Cree established economic development corporations, how they led their participation going forward on economic development in the region. This is not us telling you and other First Nations people how to do it. It's finding other First Nations that have done this successfully across Canada and bringing them in to create ideas, to share ideas, and to share in knowledge and learning so that our partners and ourselves can work towards developing these relationships. We also brought in groups from Athabasca Development Corp in northern Saskatchewan, a very unique one because it both combines First Nations and the regional stakeholders in the communities around it. So sort of a joint venture in terms of an economic development corp. The one thing that came out of those discussions is that 10, 15, and 20 years down the road, the revenues that were generated through economic development to the First Nations through the mining activities were then diversified into non-mining related activities. So the dividends that came through the businesses that the Indigenous groups had partnerships in then began to feed and grow other potential business opportunities that the First Nations had nothing to do. So you created a sustainable economy that was beyond the initial extractive resource base that the Economic Development Corp was founded on. So I see I'm at time right now. I think the next slide is probably the last one. And I will say thank you very much to all of you for listening today. And I look forward to our panel discussion with our other panel members. So thank you.